Welcome to Spring I/O and why Spring matters to Jakarta EE and vice versa. My name is Ivar Grimstad, and I'm the Jakarta EE developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. If you want to follow me on socials or connect with me after the show, I'm on most of these media, so pick your taste and just reach out. I'm active in the Java community process as a representative from Eclipse Foundation, as well as working with Jakarta EE at Eclipse Foundation. I'm also a committer at Apache NetBeans, and I run a Java user group in Sweden. So this is all about me. So why am I here? And who could have thought this would possible a couple of years ago, right? This is pretty cool, and it actually goes both ways. So let's talk about how there's all dependencies between these two frameworks or technologies on backend. But first, I want to do a history lesson. So prepare for a test afterwards. So who was born or not born in 95? So there are some. Yeah. So Java came in 95. That's older than you then. So Java came around, and Java was meant to be on the client side. It was meant to be on devices, in browsers, in applets. It was a client technology. But it soon turned out that it was very good on the server. So in 99, J2EE came around to kind of help creating these business applications on the server. And J2EE was a tremendous success. I mean, most of banks and businesses and insurances and all stuff runs on J2EE and still do. So this is kind of the reason why we're here. It's because of J2EE. That was so big a success. But it also had a little kind of over-engineered way of doing things. So some clever people around wanted to simplify this a little bit and take away some of the more dirtier part of J2EE. So Spring came in 2004. And it solved a lot of these issues with J2EE, made it simpler, made it more palatable. But there were still like, yeah, you can choose whichever you wanted to use. And then in 2006, Java EE came along, and Java EE was kind of a response to this. So from J2EE to Java EE was a big leap. We got rid of all the legacy stuff, and most people that have kind of hard feelings about the old-time enterprise Java, they think of J2EE. That's not the same as Java EE. Java EE has dependency injection, and it has annotation-based configuration, so you didn't have all these XML stuff any longer. So it was kind of a response and doing all the good things from Spring and making it even better. And maybe around 2013, when Java EE 7 came around, I would say they had caught up more or less. But in between there, JSR 330 came around. Anybody knows about 330? Yes. So that's add inject in Java, and that was Rod Johnson and Bob Lee that did that. It's the fastest JSR ever gone through the JCB, 6 months from start to finish, and that was because they wanted auto-wired in Spring. So that is what makes injection with add inject and autowires kind of work together. And then, as I said, in 2013, Java 7 came around, and there were still, like, you were using Spring Framework or Java, it was still traditional web applications. But Spring Boot in 2014 was a game changer. I mean, that really made things accessible and easy to create. So now, Spring gained momentum, and today is the de facto, industry standard for enterprise Java applications. We're kind of doing our best at Jakarta EE as well. We're doing good. And in 2017, we were transferred from the JCB and in the IP of Oracle over to Eclipse Foundation. So now it's fully open source. And everything is fully open source. And that was a long path. From 2017, it actually took a couple of years before we could do the first release because we had to do all this paperwork and licenses and stuff. And in 2020, we did our first kind of proper release, And that was Jakarta EE 9. And that was where the namespace change happened. And you're probably aware of this today when you do this migration, right? So that's something we did back in 2020. We discussed it in 2018, but we had to do it in 2020. And currently we're working on Jakarta EE 11. So we've gone some steps from Java E8, was the last release at the JCP, and now we're at 11. So it's our third release over at Eclipse Foundation. So let's just take a little talk about Jakarta EE 10, because that's the version that is available out there now. And then I'll tie it back into Spring. So Jakarta EE is about specifications. And specifications are some textual document, some PDF or whatever that human can read. And it's an API that's in Maven Central. And it has a test compatibility kit, or a TCK, that we use to test that an implementation fulfills all the requirements of the specification. And a compatible implementation, when it passes the TCK, it is a compatible implementation, and we need at least one open source compatible implementation to ratify a final specification, and then we can just go on from there. I'll get back more to what compatible implementations are out there. And Jakarta EE 10 did a lot of changes since 9, and we did these. We didn't do any changes other than the namespace in 9, and that was just because of this migration. We wanted the Java ecosystem to be able to do the migration without having changes in the APIs as well. But in 10, we moved on. So here, we're starting to do changes. And all the blue ones had updates since Jakarta EE 9. And we also have a smaller version of the platform, which is the web profile, which is more the traditional web applications. And we even introduced a even smaller profile, which is called the core profile. And the core profile is targeting microservices. And the nifty thing about core profile is that the new spec down at the bottom, it's actually not a new spec, it's a new kind of flavor of CDI, where we take away the dynamic runtime properties of CDI and resolve them at compile time, so we can compile to native using GraalVM with the implementations using core profile. So we have a couple of implementations that you can compile to native there as well. So this is kind of our smallest, more modern stack of specifications. And Jakarta EE 10 has a baseline of Java S11, but we tested TCK on 11 and 17. And there are implementations passing on 21 as well, so you can use 21 with Jakarta EE 10 if you want it. But we validated when we released it, we tested it on 11 and 17, that was the releases available there. But you cannot use 8 with Jakarta EE 10. So, how is this relevant to Spring? Well, Spring builds on top of Jakarta EE and consumes a lot of the APIs and implementation underneath. And if you didn't see it before, you notice it when Spring raised its baseline to Jakarta EE 9, and you got this namespace in your lap when you did the migration from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3. And it's obviously about this, has had big impacts, but it was also an eye-opener. I mean, the ecosystem actually saw that, oh, we are using a lot of these technologies. And we got rid of a lot of old libraries that were out there and not maintained anymore because you had to move on something that were on the new namespace. And I want to do a demo of this namespace. How many have migrated already? Most. How many have not migrated yet? Okay, a couple. So I'll do it very quickly of this namespace stuff with the focus of Jakarta EE. And I'll show it a little tool that the usually response I get there is, I wish I had this when I did the migration. And you actually had, you just didn't know about it. So there are ways we can do this migration, and of course that is this, I'll show a couple of ways. So I have this Dux data application. I'll just start it and run it so you can see what I'm talking about. It's actually this application, it's not the data, it's called Dux Boot. And I'll just run it. So it's a very simple application. It has it's just a Spring Boot application. right off from startspring.io, and it has a REST controller with a get endpoint and a post endpoint. So I can submit a user in with JSON, validate it, and then create an account and use the email from that user and store it in the database. And likewise, I can do a list all users. So it's a very, very simple application. It is on Spring Boot 278, and it has a in-memory database, and it has this Duke dependency. So I have a dependency in this application, of course, and this dependency is where I have my Spring Data repository and my entity. So if I want to do this migration, of course, the absolutely simplest way is just to upgrade the Spring, and of course we're using Spring 3 since that's the latest. So I'll upgrade this one, and yeah, no I didn't run it, so maybe I should do that first before I do the stuff. Let me see if I just test it. Like I can post to it. Let me see here. There we go. So if I post, I can post a Duke at dukes.com email here. That works fine. I can look at the users. So let me see. It lists which users I have here. If I have an invalid email and post it like this, it will say bad request, like because it doesn't validate the email. So I can only import or insert users that has a valid email address. That's kind of the business logic. So let's continue with the migration. So I just go to the 3.3 version, and you'll notice that now I get the compilation errors, right? And that's the javax thingy. And you can use the IDE to fix this. So IntelliJ has this Java EE to Jakarta EE migrate packages feature. And I know you as Spring developers have some kind of aversion against clicking anything Java EE in your IDE. So this is actually pretty helpful. It doesn't hurt you, you know? you won't burn in hell for clicking on Java EE in your IDE. So this will actually do the migration for you. You can also use all kinds of tools like Open Rewrite. That will help you a lot. Or you can do it manually, like just taking one step at a time. So I'll go in and take this one manually since it's only one. But since we know this one had a dependency, so maybe we should check this dependency as well. And if I look at the dependency, oh yeah, that one is also on the old Spring Boot version. So, what did happen now? We have to upgrade this one as well to 3.3.0. And here I happen to have some Jakarta persistence stuff. So you can have dependencies that doesn't have any Spring stuff at all. It's just using some Jakarta EE APIs. And they're on the javax namespace. So if you want them to work properly, you have to kind of raise the Jakarta versions in your POM as well. And here, they are pulled in by Spring, and since I'm using Spring Data, so I don't really need them. But still, I have them here for examples, and you will have to upgrade these to the latest version as well. That will be the Jakarta EE 9 or 10 versions. Right? So in this case, I'll use 3.1.0, which is the Jakarta EE 10 version of persistence. And I'll use version 3, I think it's 3.01 or 3.2 even, of validation, which is the Jakarta EE 9 version of validation as well. So when I've done that, I also need to kind of update my dependency, because this is a dependency of my, and now, of course, I also need to do these migration here. And you can see here, these are way too many for me to fix by myself. So this is the trick, you know, or one of them. You can take these migrate packages and classes and click on this Java EE. Right? So in this case, it's just this Duke dependency. I'll run it fairly quickly and do refactor, and you're good. Right? So you shouldn't be afraid of that. So that was good. I'll also upgrade this one to a version 2.0. I can use a classifier or something, but I'll just do the version number. I will have to rebuild or reinstall my this dependencies. So I'm now in my main repository. I have a version 1.0 and 2.0. And then I can consume this one from my Duke boot application. So it's kind of, you have to start at the bottom with the dependencies and kind of work yourself way up. But you've done this migration and you probably know this. So I upgrade the dependency, reload this one. I have to maven clean package, and I'll run it again. So now I've done all the migration here. I'll run it, and I'll find this HTTP thingy. And now I'll do the duke at dukes.com. First of all, I'll just do the get. So you see that there are now no users. It's an in-memory database. So now I'll run this insert one user and list it again. It's here, fine. Let's try this use case where I didn't have a correct email, because that is kind of, you don't want crap in your database. Oh, is that well valid? Oh my God. So look, oh, I have crap in my database. So how did this happen? I have done all the migrations. And that is because there is something called transitive dependencies. And anybody having transitive dependencies in their apps? Yeah. So either you have them with your explicit dependencies you create, or Spring pulls them in some way, so you have some kind of transitive dependencies in your code. And in my case, I had this Duke dep that pulled in the Duke lib. And if I want to migrate it over, I did the Duke dep because I had the source code. It was easy, and migrated that one. Duke lib. I'm not sure how I'm going to do, because for Duke dep I have the source code. For Duke lib I don't have the source code. So how should I do this? And there can be many reasons why you don't have the source code, right? It's a library you bought sometime in the 90s, or it's something you lost the code, or you don't have the developers anymore, or it's an open source project not maintained. It can be any reason. But let's say it's just some jar you have in your internal repository that you don't have the source code for. So luckily there is something called transformation. And these are tools we created back in 2019 when we did Jakarta EE 9. And there are two tools out there that are open source and freely available. It's the Eclipse Transformer and it's the Apache Tomcat migration tool. Both do more or less exactly the same thing. And they do the bytecode transformation for you, so you don't need the source code. And these are command line tools. There are Maven plugins, Gradle plugins. You can do it at runtime when your class loader runs. So they're super flexible, all of them. So what I'm going to do is use the Eclipse Transformer, and I'm going to use the command line version of it. And the Eclipse Transformer you can find on GitHub. It's like Eclipse/Transformer. So in my application here, you may have noticed here in my Duke dep that I had this Duke lib dependency. And this is kind of the one I don't have the source code for. And the Duke lib is where this user comes from. And that's where the email is validated, right? And it has this javax validation. So the Hibernate validator that I pull in by Spring to do the Jakarta validation doesn't see this annotation because it scans for Jakarta. And this one has a javax. So that's why I didn't see it at compile time. It works, it's an annotation, but that's why it fails at runtime. Because who writes tests, right? So what I have to do is to transfer this one, and that is first. What I'm going to do is just copy it from my Maven repository, so I have it here. Then I'm going to run this. It's a Java jar. I downloaded it to my downloads tools folder. It's the org Eclipse Transformer CLI and version number, and the input is the Duke lib jar. I'll just run it, and now I have an output file as well. And if I look at these two and compare these archives, you can see the original one has the javax imports, but the output jar now is transformed. So this is how I can do on bytecode, and this can be done on all of the dependencies in my project. I can just do it recursively down. just a matter of how you configure these tools. And what I then do is that I take this output jar and install it into my Maven repository. So I do the install file where I install the duclib 1.0 and give it the same artifact and group IDs and a version number 2. So I install it in my Maven repository, and now I have a Tour version here as well that I can now consume in my ductap and go to ductap, rebuild this one, and of course I have to rebuild my application as well, since it's pulling in the rebuilt version 2 of the ductap. And when it runs now, we should be able to execute this, and you should see now it fails that request, right? Because it's not a valid. So now it discovers this thingy. So that was a very fast migration. I wanted to show this tool, the transformer, which is a very good tool. It doesn't only work for javax to Jakarta, it's any namespace. So if your company is acquired and you have to, for some reason, change the namespace of your code, you can do this, right? You're laughing, huh? So, well, the manual steps there are update the Spring version, Jakarta versions, that's a simple thing. Fix the imports, repeat all the, for all the dependencies, kind of nest it up again, and transfer is necessary, nest it all the way. There may be some additional steps as well. And these are not necessarily that easy to find, and it's not necessarily that often found in Spring applications, but you may have configured some persistence caching using the javax caching strategy or something for Hibernate, which has to rename to Jakarta caching strategy, because the namespace is not only the packages, it's also properties and XML namespaces and whatnot. So everything javax that is related to Jakarta has to be renamed. And also, of course, we can build this stuff dynamically if you want to, and we probably do. So you have to kind of verify your application that it actually does what you're expecting it to do. So Spring builds on top of Jakarta EE. And if you noticed at the keynote this morning, that the next version of Spring is saying Jakarta EE 9, 10, and early 11. So which is it? Well, we don't know. They pick and choose. So you never know what you get when they upgrade the Spring Boot version from something to something. There's suddenly some new APIs, and that can be between a milestone build and the final release. They probably suddenly bump the major version of servlets. So you have to just be aware of what you're running on, and that is why it's kind of neat to know what's coming in Jakarta 11, because as you see, that will hit Spring in November this year. You will have some of these Jakarta 11 versions of these specifications in your code base. And these are, all the blue here, are the ones that are updated in Jakarta 11. So you see, there are updates all along here. And many of them are pulled in by the new versions of Spring and Spring Boot. So if you just color them black, and then we start laying over Spring, and I'll quickly go through where we have kind of a direct overlap. So Jakarta Mail is used directly by Spring. It's used by everybody because Java Mail is de facto mail API out there. So if you're using any mail, sending mail from an application, your chances are you're using Java Mail, which is now Jakarta Mail. So you have to change the namespace there to use the newer versions. Messaging. So Jakarta messaging is formerly known as JMS, and Spring kind of abstracts away from whatever underlying mechanisms you're using, but you have this JMS template, and that will pull in whatever implementation of Jakarta messaging or JMS that is under there. It's abstracted away so you as a developer don't see it, but your runtime will. So you have kind of a runtime dependency there on messaging. Concurrency is sort of the same thing. Whenever Jakarta concurrency implementation is detected, so if you have it on your class path, it will be auto-adapted in. So you will be able to use it. So you don't really see it as a developer or know about it, but it is there lurking underneath. And if that's what's present in your class, if you drop one of these transitive dependencies of yours into your application, and then suddenly this is what you get. But it auto-adapts, so you're shielded away from it in a very neat way, so that's fine. Servlet is another thing. So if you notice when you start out Spring Boot, what it says there in the middle, starting service Tomcat, starting servlet engine, Apache Tomcat 10. And this is a previous version of Spring Boot. I can't exactly remember which version of it is, but I think the baseline there was Jakarta EE 9. But you see, it's already on 10. And Apache Tomcat 10 was the one that were supporting Servlet 6, I think. But if you started today, you may suddenly see Tomcat 11 or even Tomcat 12 there. And then you have newer versions of Servlet available. And Tomcat is the default. You can, of course, configure it to any Servlet engine you want, like Jetty is easy, mostly used, I think. You can use Undertow, OpenLiberty. Just find your favorite Servlet engine and configure it. It's super flexible there. But all of them are a Servlet engine. And you just have to be aware that the Servlet engine you're pulling in is actually the one you're expecting to run, so you have the same APIs available. So if you take in the Spring initializer and create a new Spring Boot application, and you choose war, you have that option. You don't have to choose jars, you can choose wars. So if you for some reason do that, and you have a Tomcat running in the basement, your sysadmin has his Tomcat, it's 9, and you create this new Spring Boot 3 war that you send to the IT and say, deploy it on the Tomcat cluster. And it starts, it runs, it works, but it won't do anything because the servlet isn't discovered. It's looking for a javax servlet, but you get a Jakarta servlet because you're on Spring Boot 3. So that won't work, and you have to be on at least Tomcat 10. So you have to tell the basement guys that, hey, you have to upgrade. So if you're on that kind of stack. And in Jakarta Servlet 6.1, and this is what's coming in October for you, we're releasing Jakarta EE in July. So these versions are already available. Servlet is currently on its way to Maven Central, Servlet 6.1. So Tomcat and Jetty and the others will implement this. So we're doing some stuff in Jakarta, some cross-cutting concerns, and some of them are around the deprecation of the security manager in Java SE. So we're not removing it, but we're removing references to it. So whenever it's gone, the specs aren't affected. So we're removing the security manager references anywhere in the specification. So if you're using security manager, other than allow all, which is what everybody is using anyway, but if you're using the security manager, actually using it, you should be aware, and that doesn't matter whether you're on Jakarta Spring or as long as you're on Java. That's what you have to be aware of when you upgrade there. Otherwise, it's a fine-grained control of status code, so that when you do redirects, you can actually say exactly what code you want to do. So if you do that kind of fine-grained things in Spring, you can do this through the Servlet APIs. And when 6.1 is there, you got it to your on your computer. So persistence is another one. And anybody using Hibernate? Yeah. So Hibernate is an implementation of Jakarta persistence. And Hibernate, I think Hibernate 6 is implementing Jakarta EE 10. Hibernate 7 implements Jakarta EE 11. And Hibernate 7 is already on its way out. So when you see Hibernate 7 in your log files, then you're getting Jakarta EE 11 versions of it. So in 10, what we did there was to introduce UIDs as basic Java types. So now you can do these, have a field, in this case the ID, as Java util ID directly, without doing the mapping from string to UID as you had to do before. And this is available in Spring Boot today, as long as you're on persistent 3.1 or higher. So I want to demo that. So if you look at the application I have here, you may have noticed in the log file here, I just have to post a correct one here, dux.com. So I'll post this, We can see in the log file it says created with ID 1. So it has a long as the primary key. So if I wanted to use persistent 3.1 features directly and use the UIDs, I can just change it here to UID. And rather than having a long here, I'm using the, UID, there we go. And also the setter, like this. So I fixed that, and also I have to tell my Spring Data repository that is going to use UIDs. So when I've done that, the only thing I have to do then is to I'll stop the application. I have to rebuild the dependency because that's where it is. And since this was the dependency, I have to rebuild the application. And then when I start it and do a, let's find the HTTP thingy here. When we do this, I insert it like this, and now we can see I'm using an UID in the log. So that's how easy you can leverage the Jakarta EE 10 stuff in your Spring Boot application without touching your dependencies or anything, because you're getting persistent 3.1 by default. And that is why it may be good for you to look at what's coming in Jakarta Persistent 3.2, because that's coming to you in November when Spring Boot, Spring Framework 6.2 was it, I think, is the baseline for Spring Boot. So you can now use Java records as embeddable classes, which is a pretty cool thing. This is not related to Spring, but if you for some reason are using a persistent context, you can now inject it. So we're kind of going towards a CDI only model. You can do a programmatic configuration of persistence, which is also, so you don't need the persistent XML if you for some reason are using that. I mean, it's better configuration in Spring, so you probably should just stick to whatever that is. But if you for some reason want to do programmatic configuration, you can do that directly. They're doing a lot of updates in persistent 3.2, a lot of kind of convenience methods for the criteria language and stuff. But what's more important for you is that they're deprecating the old calendar date and time and timestamp and those kind of things. So if you're using that in your application, you need to move to the Java Time API before they remove it. It's not removed in this release, but sooner or later it's going away. So go to the Java Time API if you haven't done that yet. So WebSocket. So WebSocket is it sort of is the same thing as with the messaging and concurrency, is that it's extended by Spring, so you abstract it away from it so you don't see it. But if it detects a newer versions of Jakarta WebSocket, it will kind of uplift and upgrade the protocol to use the latest versions. So that is supported by Jakarta WebSockets. Validation we've already talked about. It's pulled in, and if you use anything like @valid in your code, like @email, @notnull, @nonzero, etc. for your entities, that's the Hibernate validator you're using. And Hibernate validator implements Jakarta validation. And in Jakarta Validation 3.1, they're doing one small change, and that is to support Java records. And while this has worked before anyway, because the Hibernate validator has supported it, now it's specified how it should work and that it should work, so you can actually rely on it. Before it was just pure luck that it works. Transactions are also something that is used throughout with Spring, but you have a very decent, very good programmatic or declarative style API that you abstract away from whatever transactions mechanisms you're using underneath. And if Jakarta transactions are used, that's what you get, but you don't have to mess with it. So it's a very nice environment to just do the Spring stuff, and whatever's underneath there is being used. RESTful Web Services. I added this one today, and that is because you can use Jersey alongside your Spring MVC application in Spring Boot 3.3 at least. You probably can do this before as well, but you have to configure it to whenever it's not finding it, it will go to the regular servlet. So this is a way of using Jersey if you're using that for creating your RESTful endpoints, which is fully possible. And Jersey is an implementation of Jakarta RESTful Web Services. So this is sort of something of the implementation stuff that is pulled in and kind of has the APIs with it. And JSON binding is also the same thing. It's auto-configured to pull in Eclipse JSON, or that's the recommended one to use for JSON binding. So that's what you're getting when you're doing the JSON binding in Spring. Annotations and the interceptors are kind of, or dependency injection is sort of related. And that's the JSR 330 that I mentioned earlier. That came in, was it 2009? And this is kind of making add, inject, and override interchangeable. So you can use anything in Spring. It doesn't really matter which one of them you're using. They both work. And together with the Jakarta annotations, this is what makes it work. The Jakarta annotations in combination with add, inject. So as you see, there is quite an overlap of Jakarta EE. I haven't counted it, but I would say it's about half, maybe almost half, that are more or less automatically underneath, without you knowing it, or directly because you ask for it, getting in Spring. So what about the other way around then? So I'd like to see a little bit of beyond the Jakarta E10 to look at that. And that is Jakarta 11, which is coming in July. And with Jakarta 11, we're establishing a release cadence to release it 6 to 9 months after a Java LTS release. So Java 21 was released in September. So in July, we release, June, July, we release Jakarta EE 11. And that's the same cadence we hope to do with Java 21 when that comes, 25 when that comes around. 6 to 9 months after, we will release Jakarta EE 12. So you kind of rely on this rhythm of releases. And Jakarta EE 11 has one new specification, which is Jakarta Data. And that is to standardize the repository pattern for data access. And this may sound a little familiar. And if I want to do a demo here, I think we have time. Yeah, we should have time. So I'll stop this one, and I'll go to this is a Jakarta application. So prepare to be amazed. So I'm running on OpenLiberty, and I'm using the dev mode, so I don't have to restart anything. I'm on the 11 milestone 2 of Jakarta EE. And I just have the OpenLiberty plug-in here to get the runtime for me. So the code here, the way we configure a Jakarta application is this is a RESTful application. So I just have to extend this application and set the application path. So this is similar to the kind of the Spring Boot configuration stuff. Then I have a simple greeting, which is an persistence entity. And I have a greetings resource. So if I wanted to use to create a repository here, I can create the let me call it a greeting repository. Just do this. I'll annotate it with at repository, and I'll extend. I don't want a class. I want an interface. Extends. CRUD repository, and I want greeting, and I want long. So this looks familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So we see good stuff and we recognize it, and we pull it back. So it's not called stealing; it's reuse. So, yeah. So if I want to have a find by name ignore case or something like that. You know how this works, right? So I can create all this this kind of stuff the same way as Spring can do it. And if I want to use this, of course I don't use autowired. I use add-inject, and I have this greeting repository, and I can return now greeting repository find all to list. So that's how I would do it. If I wanted to add something here, I can take a greeting saved equals greeting repository is save greeting, like this, and maybe I want to print something saved with ID, and then greeting get ID, like this. And so now I can start querying this one. Here I'm using MySQL in the background, but if I want to just check, there's nothing here. So it's very empty right now. So if I post a hello from Duke, it says OK here, and it's in the database. So see how easy it is for a Spring developer to use Jakarta Data, because it's basically the same thing. So if I want to say here Mrs. Duke rather than Duke, so I have two entries in my database, like this, and so now I have Duke and Mrs. Duke. So if I want to query this one and just get like one message when I do this, then I can do this. Use the find by name method I created and run that one, and not found if I don't find it. So this is how you create RESTful endpoints in Jakarta. We have this @get annotation and @path, rather than having the @web target and the properties inside. The same thing, it's just a different way. So if I now do go here and query greetings and do by name, say that I want to have Duke, now I'll only get the something response is empty. Well, yeah. So yeah, it's supposed to work, but let's not dwell with that because we're running out of time. So this could be a Spring Data application, or it could be a Jakarta Data application. What's interesting here is that when you pull in Hibernate 7, Hibernate 7 implements Jakarta Data. So you'll get these stuff, unless some magic is done, you will have these interfaces available in your IDE. So unless you pay attention to what imports you're using, you may end up using Jakarta Data rather than Spring Data. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be solved somehow, but that you're going to exclude things or whatever. But if you just pull in Hibernate 7, you will get the Jakarta Data, as well as if you have the Spring Data in your class path. So how they mix, I'm not sure. But if you want to use Jakarta Data, I'm pretty sure you can, and just swap Spring Data with it, out with it. And Jakarta Data actually adds something that Spring Data doesn't have. And we're doing the Jakarta Data query language, which is a subset of the Jakarta persistence query language. And that makes it possible to do stuff like this, like you have a query and put that on top of your method. And this is probably a little bit confusing to use exactly this, like where title like and books, and the method name is called books by type. So it's kind of confusing for the person who's using it. Is it by type or title? Oh, so you have to make sure you name things correctly if you do this stuff. But it is possible, and it's possible to do it much more advanced than this. So this query language is there. There's also an opportunity out there if you're into open source or want to make a career in open source. I would like to see an implementation of Jakarta Data over at Apache, because we're doing it with Eclipse Link at Eclipse Foundation, but I would like to see it at Apache as well. So if you're a Spring Data developer or know this kind of domain and want to do some other open source stuff, go to Apache and create a Jakarta Data implementation. They will be super happy, and you will be a hero. We're also doing Jakarta NoSQL, so we're standardized integration with NoSQL databases. And the implementation for Jakarta NoSQL called Eclipse JNoSQL, that's one of the implementation, that will implement both Jakarta Data and Jakarta NoSQL. So you can also use Jakarta Data with NoSQL databases. We're also looking into Jakarta RPC, which will standardize gRPC within Jakarta EE. This hasn't gone very far, so this is also a specification that needs some help from if you know this protocol, if you want it. And if you looked at the slides Jürgen showed in the beginning, the questions from the what protocols are, gRPC is not super high, but it was among kind of the 5, 6, 7 highest. So it is something that is lurking there, and I think it's worthwhile looking at doing some specification work around this. Jakarta 11 will be based on Java 17. We had initially decided to go on 21 with this one, but as you saw, 17 is still widely adopted, and we didn't want to kind of make it unavailable for that big group of people. And it will also be a problem for Spring now in November to move to Jakarta 11 specifications, because then you would have to go on 21. And that is probably something you didn't want to do. So we're staying on 21, but we're doing the same thing as we did with the previous release. We're testing on 21 and 17, so you can use 21 if you want, and we're just making sure it works on both. I think there will be some implementation on 17. Most will probably move on to 21 or higher, but we're making sure it works on both. So to sum up, Jakarta 10 is what we have today, and these are the changes made since Jakarta 9. So these are the changes you are having in your Spring Boot environment today. I think it's mostly Jakarta 10 versions that are pulled in when you create a new Spring Boot application. Jakarta 11 updates a little bit less than the amount of specifications, but there's still a decent amount of updates, and most of these overlap with the ones that are used by Spring. So our timeline for Jakarta EE, as you see, we have this 2-year cadence. In 2020, we did the Jakarta 9 with the namespace. In 2022, we introduced the core profile. And in 11, we're embracing records, becoming more CDI-centric, having Jakarta Data added, and also we're removing and deprecating a lot of stuff and supporting Java 21. And we're supporting Java 21 in concurrency in a runtime-aware way. So if you're on 17, and you say that, hey, set the virtual flag equals true, you will get a platform thread. But if you're on 21, you will get a virtual thread. So we're supporting it in a what we call a runtime-aware way. So I hope this talk kind of opened your eyes a little bit for how Jakarta is relevant to Spring, and how Spring is relevant to Jakarta EE. And Spring builds on top of Jakarta EE. If you look at how they overlap, you can see there is a very fair amount of specifications that are overlapping or being used directly or indirectly. We're not going to do this again. You're safe. But I don't think it was a so bad thing when we were over the bump. I think it's a good thing, because now we have a very clear separation. So if we look back at the history thingy, we can say that J2EE brought Java to the server. That's the key to that. J2EE is what we have to thank for our careers, for our jobs, for being here today. I don't think Java would have been here hadn't it been that J2EE made it such a tremendous success on the server. And Spring was inspired by this and made it better. And Spring has simplified it, and Spring is the technology that makes Java relevant today. It's most of the ecosystem are using in some way or the other Spring, and it inspired how to do Java EE, and by that Jakarta EE now develops a foundation for, and is also inspired by Spring by pulling in data, for example, and we're collaborating. We have people from the former VMware working on specifications on serverless specifications, on the data specification. We have people there that are so it's a very good ecosystem to be in today and work together. If you want to know more about Jakarta EE, you can go to jakarta.ee. So or change your DNS spring.io to Jakarta EE. And you can even have the start Jakarta EE, and you get the Jakarta starter. So whenever we see something good, yeah. So start Jakarta EE is where you can fill in a couple of properties and generate a zip file with a Jakarta EE project for you, so you can test it out very simply. I write a weekly blog post and blogs from conferences and around, so please do read this if you want to stay up to date of what's happening in the Jakarta EE world, which you should, because it's coming your way whether you like it or not. And if you're not looking and paying attention, maybe we do this namespace chain again, but I don't think we will. But the demo code from this is on Jakarta EE Spring, and on my GitHub you'll find a lot of Jakarta stuff there. And I hope you have enjoyed this talk. And if you want to know more about Jakarta EE, I have a course on LinkedIn called the Jakarta EE Overview. So if you have a paid learning account, you can do this course and get a badge on your profile. And with that, I want to thank you very much for having me here, for coming and listen, and I'll stay around for the rest of the conference, and I hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much for listening.